normally don't see reporters bringing on other reporters, but this is the Washington Post Live. I didn't know they had a show. I didn't know like they did stuff like this. So the elitist of the elites of any so-called journalist or corporate journalist, and this one is called, will Governor Ron DeSantis' Ukraine stance, he's not fit to be president because he's not staunchly a hawk publicly. You know how he's taking this softer stance that everybody's going crazy. And I did have a segment. I didn't have enough time. This is one of the stories I didn't have enough time to include. So hopefully, we can talk about it in the,
I'm just chilling about it.
The intro. It's because there is a complete freak out. I was searching, looking for news stories, and I kept seeing on every network, on every newspaper that has a YouTube, something about Ron DeSantis' views. It's a complete freak out that the two top people, because they were hoping Ron was going to deliver these contrasts, the hawk that he's been.
Yeah.
Completely caught the establishment off guard that he's taking this stance.
Yeah. There's been like a meltdown because, and sorry to cut you off, but
go ahead, dude.
Because I'm glad you've been following that story, because it's been super interesting to me, because if you've been watching Fox News and general mainstream conservative voices, they've been pushing Ron DeSantis pretty hard. And my theory was one of the reasons why they're doing that is because Ron DeSantis is definitely easier to control than Trump. He's not going to be crazy on the Ukraine war. And then DeSantis made the smart political move, because you can argue that those neocons are the ones who are out of touch, right? So yes. DeSantis did the smart political move. Now those people are panicking, because now everyone knows that Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, and none of these clowns have a chance. So they were banking on DeSantis, and they was going to help him defeat Trump, and then you have a more neocon president. And that's definitely the direction that Ron DeSantis would have went if it wasn't for Donald Trump. Yes. But Ron DeSantis has a smart political team. You gotta say it's smart. They made that adjustment. Unlike the NATO left, the Bernie Sanders progressives who never make adjustments, Ron DeSantis and his team, they saw what the fuck was going on. They saw what Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying. It was like, yeah, time for us to pivot, because he did. He did, because he criticized Obama from his right on the Ukraine war, saying he's not funding Nazis enough, right? But I'll pass back to you.
There's a couple of things you said that they're going to touch upon specifically, and in particular, the guy in the bottom right-hand corner seems to be particularly hawkish, and he's gonna talk about a couple of the points you make, and I'll stop the video when we get to that part. Here we go. Now this is Washington Post Live and the freak out about Ron DeSantis.
Talk about the support for Ukraine and what's happening within the Republican Party. There's a growing divide among Republicans on whether Ukraine's security should be any of America's concern. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis saying this week that becoming more involved supporting Ukraine is not in the U.S. national interest. George, is this the clear sign yet that the Republican Party is no longer the party of Reagan?
You see how they have to dress up war and use Reagan? Because they can't say they're no longer the party of the military-industrial complex. He can't say that, even though that's what he's mean. So they use a pretty name like Ronald Reagan, which they love. It's a propaganda tactic, but these guys are not amateurs right here. Let's continue with the video. Unless you had a comment, Nick, let me know. Let me know when you want to stop it.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's another sign of the redundant evidence that Reaganism, as his opponents like to call it, is under attack. It's not yet evidence that they've taken control of the party to that extent. What Mr. DeSantis said in this flippant way, which he said through Tucker Carlson, you can't really make this nonsense up, that this is a mere territorial dispute. If that is his settled view after the dust settles, and he elaborates.
You hear what he just said there? If that is his settled view, that is, he understands he's going to get a talking to about this. And if this is where he eventually lands at, then he's not fit to be president. Now, understand who this particular person is, George Will. Like, he's not just a regular, like, he's been in the game, he's entrenched, like entrenched on top of entrenched, right? So he understands how the game rolls, Nick. He's saying, hey, if this is his settled view after the dust settle, if that's his way of describing, like, yes, some people will be talking to him.
Yeah.
If this is a settled view, then he's not fit for president, which could be true. I don't know if it's true or not. But what are your thoughts on that particular point?
How delusional he is? So he said he's like, of course you have Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis that is lying about this, and that shows that there's will among the American people that is against this war. He's talking as if oh man, these people better take our position. Are we gonna destroy them? Like, no, Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis is gonna do whatever the fuck they want to do in the Republican Party. It does not matter what George F. Will has to say. That's why I think it's delusional that these liberals, they were saying if Trump and DeSantis run on Ukraine, he's gonna be sorry. How out of touch are you? How out of touch are you? That's like looking at a Democrat and say, you better not support Medicare for all, or else the people turn on you. Like, it means nothing. But anyway, let's continue.
But I think it's funny because what you say, like how if he's tone deaf, is he tone deaf depending on who he's talking to? Because this is Washington Post Live. Imagine the person who's actually watching Washington Post Live. I mean, other than a person who's doing it for research.
Live.
Yes, like
you're watching the live stream, dude. That's a very small percent of the population, and to your point, that's the 1% in their kids.
Yes.
The 1% of their kids and their immediate family and friends. No ordinary people watching this.
Operates on this, then he's not fit to be president, period. His words, let me give you an echo, an anticipation of those words. 1938, Neville Chamberlain said about Czechoslovakia.
You know how you notice how these people, this certain segment of people do this, and in trying to answer questions, they go back to history and they say, and then you know who else does this? Marianne Williamson does this. And I keep pointing out in videos, she needs to stop doing that. Go ahead, Nick.
They always bring up the Chamberlain example with Hitler, and this is the United States' favorite example because that's such an extreme example. They're like, this is why you never advocate for peace, or there will be Hitler. I cannot emphasize this enough, guys. They say this about anything and everything. Mm-hmm. When people criticize the Iraq war, they're like, oh, remember what Chamberlain said about Hitler? When people call it Vietnam, remember what Chamberlain said about Hitler? Why do you think they pull out that one quote? Because that's every other example. Every other war was ended via peace and negotiations. There have been many conflicts that did not end in war because of peace and negotiations. So they pulled the one example out of the countless of the last century that show that peace and negotiation works. They bring out the Chamberlain Hitler examples and they spam it every single story. And whenever they do that, that's a tell. I'm like, man, they have no other points because I've been studying empire propaganda for quite some time now. So whenever they have no points, they bring this one up because like shit. They can't say what Ron DeSantis says because that's why I laughed at first because I thought he was going to do that. I was like, oh, go ahead. Share the comments of the candidate criticizing Ukraine. That would harm your position. So instead of quoting DeSantis and picking it apart one by one, what he does is bring up some irrelevant historical example so you can shift the conversation away from the Ukraine debate. It's a very common tactic during the Iraq War. Bring up the Chamberlain quote so people don't talk about how ridiculous your weapons of mass destruction campaign is. So you see the tactic? Talk about history so you don't talk about the current event. So go ahead, CJ.
Yes, and it's so weird though that liberal media, not like these guys, because they're just class journalists. They don't really liberal, whatever. They're just class journalists. A lot of these people are, but liberal media, meaning the Democrats, are taking this position, which is very weird. A lot of this since the pandemic has shook up a lot, shook up economics, it shook up geopolitical politics, and it also has I forget the point that I was going to make. My bad. Anyway, let's continue with the video.
and Germany, in a faraway country between people of whom we know nothing. Well, we knew a lot about them soon enough. And so if this is a terrible thing for the DeSantis brand. The DeSantis brand is I'm a tough guy. I have a spine of steel.
So delusional. So delusional. So I'll be quick. I want the video keep playing.
No, go ahead.
That's so delusional. Because as I mentioned earlier, if Ron DeSantis did not do this, he would have got washed by Donald Trump in the primary. Absolutely washed. The right-wing base is not falling for this bullshit no more, right? So DeSantis made the decision so he can be competitive against Trump. Meanwhile, this out-of-touch neocon is saying, man, DeSantis really screwed himself here. The exact opposite.
But I think the military-industrial complex believes that candidates are supposed to sacrifice their candidacy also for the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
And what both of these candidates are saying, no. I'm putting my candidacy above yours in the way that I'm not going to publicly be on your side right now, even though in the background, of course, I'm doing the same thing that everybody does. I need to publicly do this for my candidacy. I'm sorry that it might fuck up your sales right now, but this is what I got to do to get to the place, and then I'll be back on your side. And weapons manufacturers and their minions, like this guy here, are sent out to be those attack dogs. But it was just the sheer amount, Nick, of videos I found on this topic of people just kind of
it was a whole media day or two where DeSantis made a comment. Like, remember the Tucker Carlson segment? That segment created a media firestorm. Then within that firestorm was like, hey, do you niggas see what DeSantis said? Like, that was within, and then it continued a little bit on as the story continued, because I'm a media hawk. I'll be watching what these propagandists say now. So they definitely flipped out because, as I said earlier in the stream, their backup definitely was probably DeSantis up, because they're like, yeah, you see what he said about Venezuela? You see what he said about Colombia? You see what he says about Cuba? We can definitely get him on our side in Ukraine. After those comments, they're like, Now, I actually got a story I want to do later. And not, I don't want to interject this segment, but go ahead. Later, I'm going to do a segment about Marjorie Taylor Greene, because Marjorie Taylor Greene posted a video where she called for war against Mexico and AMLO. So these people who are pretending to be against the Ukraine war, which I have been saying for months. How long have I been saying this? They are not anti-war. They just want to spend geopolitical resources more efficiently. So they thought they contained Ron DeSantis on this issue because of his ideology, which essentially is that, but that's not true. But go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, so here's just another example of the same thing. Oh, I'll just show two instead of showing all of them. So we showed you the Washington Post Live. Now, this is, of course, MSNBC. Of course, Nick, I had to go to Joe Scarborough. But listen to what this Murphy guy, elected Rep Murphy, says about DeSantis support. How they're framing it, not peace or like it's better resources spent in a different way. But listen how he frames it right here.
Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. He's a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. We're talking to you about this. Joe Biden fended off Donald Trump in the presidential election. Some would argue to save our democracy from Trump's fascism. But Trumpism obviously still exists, and it's coursing through the veins of Ron DeSantis, especially as it comes to the issue of Russia. Are you concerned about this?
Now, you see how it's not like she made up that line. They're always anything they deem as insane against the ruling class. Trump is saying, they're gonna. You could have not talked to Trump for years. You see how this Trump in Trump influence. They're gonna insert Trump because they want to attach Trump to this guy now on this stand. She said specifically this part.
Yeah, you see how I laugh. Like, these segments are so funny to us. Like, say you laugh when you watch this. This is so hilarious because you are literally married to Joe Scarborough, one of the biggest fascists in media. And she over here saying, oh my God, Donald Trump is a fascist. Like, you know who the fuck you married to? I let the video play. This shit is hilarious.
Yeah, and everybody has to know these people are literally friends going to the same dinner party.
Yes.
Billionaires hang around with billionaires. Their kids go to the same schools. They hang around each other. So, but anyway, let's get back. Listen to what this rep says. Chris Murphy. I was trying to remember his name. Senator Chris Murphy. I said rep earlier.
Well, let me make it clear first, and thanks for having me, that you can have good faith objections to U.S. support for Ukraine. We should always be willing to have a debate about whether it makes sense or not for the United States to send troops abroad, to support wars overseas. It's not by definition unpatriotic to question U.S. military involvement in places outside of the United States. But to Claire's point, this doesn't appear to be a good faith objection. The Republican Party, in particular the Trump wing of the Republican Party, has decided to turn its back on democracy. They have tremendous affection for dictators because they've decided that they would rather sacrifice American democracy if that's what's necessary to stay in power. And so I worry that DeSantis's and Trump's support for Putin and opposition to Ukraine is part and parcel of a broader lack of enthusiasm for democracy and self-governance. So I'm willing to have.
It's a lack of enthusiasm for democracy is what this is about, Nick. The framing complete. Now, if you heard that story, if you heard this segment, and just like no title, and you read some story, you have no idea that these are the same story because he's not at all talking about what DeSantis said. He's just framing it as you're pro-Putin. Go ahead.
Do you guys see why I have my position? This is why Democrats are extremely nefarious. The propaganda that he's doing here is rank U.S. empire neocon propaganda. This comes from Democrat MSNBC propaganda. When you hear this insane person speak, how can anyone come to the conclusion that his party is the lesser of two evils? Like, I feel like the people who believe the Democrats are the lesser of two evils, these are the people who don't watch them. They don't see what bills they vote for. They have no idea what the fuck is going on. They watching Kyle Kalinske videos, watching Ben Shapiro videos, watch them react to Jordan Peterson, have no idea what the Democrats are doing. And then every 4 years, they be like, oh my God, the Democrats are less too evil. Why are your politics so anti-Democrat, Nick? Oh my God, they don't understand. This guy is repeating ridiculous propaganda saying that, oh my God, DeSantis and Trump, they love dictators and tyrants because they're calling for peace. Meanwhile, your good friend is Benjamin Netanyahu. Pause. He's friends with literally an ethno-fascist who is purging the Palestinian people in line with the most far-right regime in Israel. But according to these people, only the right, only Donald Trump, and only DeSantis are fascists. This is propaganda and empire lies to the next level. It's like, I don't differentiate Republicans from Democrats. If anything, Democrats make Republicans like chumps because they're more effective at what they do, as the late, great Glenn Ford explained. But continue, CJ.
Absolutely. Let's click it here.
To have the debate about whether it makes sense to, send money to Ukraine. I think it makes a ton of sense because it is just true. If we don't defend Ukraine, the entire post-World War II order falls apart. And it is not hyperbole.
The entire post-World War II order falls apart. What could he be referring to there, Nick? Now we know we talked about this before, but what is he referring to when he says that order post World War II?
He's talking about the rules-based order that allows the United States to have a torture facility in Guantanamo Bay, but no one has the ability to do anything about it. He's talking about the international rules-based order that allowed the Israeli people to slaughter Palestinians, and people can't do anything about it. He's talking about the international order that allowed Jair Bolsonaro to slaughter indigenous people in Brazil, and no one is allowed to do anything about it because he's friends with Donald Trump and the United States regime. This is why these people are my number one enemy. And I told you guys many times, I don't give a fuck about Putin. Don't give a fuck about Russia. It's not the Soviet Union anymore. It's not a communist state anymore. Don't care about it. But we have a very similar geopolitical foe. And I see the strategy of Putin and Russia uniting with formerly colonized countries to repose this U.S. imperialist machine. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really fuck with Putin, but I'm down because we got the same enemy. The enemy that maintains this global order that oppresses Black indigenous people globally, that crush communist and socialist movements globally. the empire that literally imprisons 1/4 of the world's prison population. That's what I resist, and I do it unapologetically. I am not a neutral political commentator. That was never my intention. I never was like, I want to button up and be an established New York Times. No, I was like, I ain't get on YouTube to preach my fucking truth, and I'm against NATO and the establishment goons, and I really need the left to pick up that mentality because there's so many, and I'm not naming names here because I don't need to do that, but if people are like, I'm going to just say shit down the line. I want to be objective. No, the right-wingers and capitalists do not do that because there's no fucking reason to do that. Lenin wrote a newspaper because he understood how effective it is for you to control the narrative. We need to correct the nonsense that comes from the empire, and we need to unapologetically push our positions because that is what the capitalists do. Anyway, so
I must say this as my last comment because we can close the introduction. Marianne Williamson is to the right of Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump on Ukraine, Nick.
Jesus.
Is this even believable, man? She is literally to the right. Because if you recall back to the Jordan interview, this hasn't been a blank check so far, over $100 billion. It hasn't been a blank check. What are you talking about? This is a priority, freedom, and all this other stuff. Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump is like, what do you mean, peace? 24 hours right now. You go back to that interview with her, she's talking about it's not ready for peace right now. It's not time. That's what she said.
Yes.
So she is to the right of Ron DeSantis.